Hi guys, Vance here. As someone who has been playing Final Fantasy XIV passionately since the beta and has thousands of hours into this game, I wanted to give you, someone who is interested in this game, a bit of insight from my perspective, whether this game is something you would like or not. So, is Final Fantasy XIV worth picking up in 2021? Let's get right into it. Final Fantasy XIV takes place in a fictional land of Eorzea, 5 years after the events of the original 2010 release. At launch, the game was met with a negative response because of a clunky combat system and a very poor user interface which was very dated. Whilst the graphics and music were praised on the other hand, the game essentially failed. 2 years later, the servers were eventually taken down in 2012. The development team was then restructured, with the lead game producer being replaced with Naoki Yoshida, or as most people call him, Yoshi P. In 2013, a year later, the game was re-released as A Realm Reborn, which was a huge success. Since then, we have seen 3 successful expansion launches with Heavensward, Stormblood, and as of 2021, we are now on the 3rd expansion, Shadowbringers, with another said to be launching this year titled Endwalker. There is a really good documentary by NoClip that shows the challenges the dev team went through and gives an insight into how passionate the dev team behind the game is. I'll leave a link in the description for that, as it is a must watch. Anyway, back to the game. Final Fantasy XIV at its heart is a multi-platform game, which means both console players and PC players play together on the very same server and share the same world. Final Fantasy XIV originally released on the PlayStation 3 and the PC back in 2013. But as of Stormblood's release in 2017, we saw the PlayStation 3 version of the game phased out and replaced with the PlayStation 4 version. With this, we got more open world spaces to explore and bigger instances, as we are no longer limited by the PS3's hardware. With Shadowbringers, with the most recent patch 5.5 has seen the release of a PlayStation 5 version, which brought in some nice quality of life changes that PC users got to take advantage of also, such as super fast loading times if you are using a solid state drive, and 4K resolution user interface and icons. Considering the game is now on the PlayStation 5, what are the graphics like? As I just mentioned, the game did originally launch in 2013, but despite this, the graphics are quite beautiful. However, if you take a closer look, you will see the game is starting to show its age, most notably the textures. The textures are very low resolution, and it is more noticeable now that we can run the game at a 4K resolution, as the textures don't upscale that well. Sometimes this can be quite jarring, especially on ground textures and flora. Your characters stand out and look like they're from a different game. I will say that they have made use of some of the hardware, with opening up instanced areas, making them larger and feeling more open, which is certainly more welcome. I do wonder, however, how Endwalker will improve upon this. I guess we will find out more with the coming FanFest in a couple of weeks' time. Do stick around, as we will cover that in a video. Final Fantasy XIV has a very generous trial system, one which I'd hope other MMOs would take note of. The trial allows you to play through the entire core story of A Realm Reborn and the first expansion, Heavensward. It allows you to level up to level 60. With these 2 alone sees you have hundreds of hours of content for free. There are a few caveats, however. There are some restrictions, such as you cannot whisper people in-game, you cannot access the market board, which is essentially the auction house, and you cannot invite players to a group, but you can be invited and you cannot join free companies, which is a guild. There's a full terms section on the official website if you wish to know more. Once you're ready to get the game, you're probably wondering about what payment model the game has. Well, it's very similar to WoW, where you buy the boxed game and have a subscription running alongside of it. The only difference being, the game has a choice of 2 subscriptions, which is paid monthly. One which is slightly cheaper, coming in at £7.69 a month. However, this restricts you to only having 1 character per server, or the full standard price of £9.99, which allows you to have multiple characters on 1 server. I'm willing to bet the majority of you will probably go for the cheaper option, since you only need to have 1 character, as all jobs in the game can be played from 1 character. The game is designed for you to put in a significant amount of time and investment into that 1 character, and not many things are account-wide either. So tell me, Vance, what is the group content like? Well, dungeons are slightly different to what you're probably used to. A dungeon consists of a 4-player group, 1 tank, 1 healer and 2 DPS. Generally, dungeons have 3 bosses throughout, with mob groups separating them. The main difference is that dungeons have an ability that is shared by the entire group, and anyone can use it. It's called Limit Break, which is an ultimate ability built up over time, and it's different depending on which job or class is using it. So, for example, a healer using it will do a huge surge of healing. However, most people always save it for the DPS to use on the last part of bosses' health pools. For people who are interested in raiding, there's a cool collaboration event going on at the moment with the Nier franchise, which is a 24-man raid, and as of this current patch, we're on the 3rd release of the Nier series raid. So there's plenty to do and many transmog from these raids to obtain. I would love to cover PvP, but everyone who does play this game knows it isn't the best in this game. Actually, for this video I tried to queue up for PvP roulette to showcase it, however, I was sat in the queue for almost an hour and had to give up. It doesn't appear to be a feature that is well favoured, so if PvP is something you must have, I would suggest looking into this a bit more to see if it is for you. Now, to talk about the story, Final Fantasy XIV at its core is a narrative-driven experience, one which is very much a solo player experience. Throughout the story, you'll have times where you'll be required to join up in random groups for dungeons and boss instances, but yes, aside from those, it is definitely a single player experience, and it is quite difficult at times if you want to go through it with a partner. I will warn you that if you're the type of person that does skip quest text in WoW or skips dialogue in Elder Scrolls Online, this is going to be a massive ball ache for you. The story sees you at the start as an adventurer fresh off the wagon looking to become a hero. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, it does have a very tedious slow start with fetch quests, seeing you collect coins off the floor or sending messages to someone across the city and back again. If you can see past this, the story does open up at around level 40 to 50, which quickly ramps up into a fantastic adventure. There's one small thing that I hear from a lot of non-native English speakers from my community, and that is that sometimes the characters in the story, such as Oriange, can speak in a very complex dialect, which is kind of a mix of Shakespearean and hyper-formal English. So I'd 100% recommend you use your own native language for the game, as that is only restricted for the English version of the game. The game does offer a story skip potion, which you can purchase from the Mog Station, which is the cash shop of Final Fantasy XIV. However, do yourself a favour and save your money, as you will be robbing yourself of quite a lot of experience and fantastic moments in this game. Remember, this game at its core is built upon the story. If you're used to games such as WoW that allows add-ons created by the community, then you'll be severely disappointed here. There are DPS meters such as ACT, which is a community-made add-on, but that is a grey area that we do not recommend pursuing as it is against terms of service. There's also something called Reshade for PC users specifically, which allows you to add some more effects to the game, to colour correct, or even add some depth of field. It does come at a significant performance cost for PC users, but most people use it for taking screenshots. Speaking of screenshots, I'll quickly talk about the screenshot function in the game. It goes by the name Group Pose Tool. However, the name given by the community is GPose. Final Fantasy XIV has one of the best screenshot functionality in any MMO I've seen as of yet, which allows you to pause time, change colour, camera angles, use various emotes, and add text and stickers to your screenshot. It can be addictive and has spawned various communities around this function, as there's a very passionate community who love to take screenshots and share them with each other. As of Shadowbringers, leveling, crafting and gathering has never been as easy to get into. Before, they could have been seen as tedious and monotonous for some. Fishing has been given ocean fishing, which is a really fun group activity with up to 24 players, where you and many others take a boat out to sea and fish. And you can do that from level 1. It's on a 2-hour window, and I recommend that if you want something really fun to do for 30 minutes, it is certainly worth a go. Now, I did say that Shadowbringers did make crafting and gathering easy, right? Well, with Shadowbringers, they brought in something called the Firmament. The Firmament is a rebuilding effort of a housing area located in Ishgard. To unlock this, you'll need to have progressed through the Heavensward expansion and simply have a level 1 crafter or gatherer. As a gatherer, the area features a gathering instance where you can farm materials using your gatherers for materials, and with those materials gathered, use them to craft items. Once you have crafted those items, you can hand them into a vendor, who will reward you with tokens that allow you to buy glamour, dyes and other things. One last thing I should mention, as of patch 5.5, there is now a fate system implemented into the Firmament, which are essentially crafting fates. Using your crafters, you can take part in these events, which also reward you with a small amount of XP, and exclusive item drops, such as mounts, items, etc. Now let's talk about the combat system. For some, the combat system is a make or break kind of deal. I'm not going to tell you that the combat system is amazing in Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV uses a tab target system which is very similar to WoW with a rotation system. I think quite a few would agree that it is kind of dated and clunky. There is no talent system in the game, and the abilities are set in stone, which doesn't really allow for diversity. There's also a high global cooldown to factor in, which compared to other MMOs is quite high. It is way more noticeable and tedious at lower levels when you have not unlocked any abilities that are off the GCD. The combat is something that can burn you out at lower levels. I know myself that the combat does however open up at around level 50, where you can start weaving in abilities off the global cooldown, so it's not as notable and feels much better. I would recommend a dancer once you have unlocked it if you want a WoW feeling character, which feels really responsive. Now to talk about the community. The Final Fantasy XIV community can be extremely helpful and welcoming to new players. But like any MMO, this community also does have a negative side to it, which can be perceived as very unwelcoming. Any form of criticism about the game does not get taken lightly. The community often forms as an angry mob driving the player out who disagrees with their stance, resulting with new players having normal questions getting downvoted in the Final Fantasy XIV Reddit, or met with passive aggressiveness. This occurs often when talking about the story and lore of the game. The one meme used for the Final Fantasy XIV players is that they'll usually respond with, "Then go play WoW," or "Go back to WoW." It is okay to play this game the way you want to play it, even if the story isn't your cup of tea. In most other MMOs such as WoW, the end game only consists of acquiring gear, raiding, PvP and high-level dungeons. However, in Final Fantasy XIV, for some people, the end game content is defined by what you as a person love to do. This could be transmog/glamour, for others can be housing or fishing, or maybe crafting. There's also raid content for those who want to push that with Savage raids. The dev team has content created for all these aspects with no real focus on one. With each patch of Shadowbringers adds a wealth of new content for those features of the game. I would like to recommend to not go in with the mindset to rush through to reach the end game, as you'll be extremely disappointed, as this game is most certainly about the journey and not what is at the end game. I really hope that this didn't come across as a negative video. I do love this game and definitely think it's a game worth considering, if you may have been on the fence whether or not to give it a shot. Final Fantasy XIV is most certainly a game that you can sink thousands of hours into. However, bear in mind that it comes with an extremely slow start that quickly ramps up into the adventure of a lifetime. It's the best time to play this game, as we're going into a new expansion soon with Endwalker. Final Fantasy XIV certainly has one of the best crafting systems in any MMORPG, which feels rewarding, with a vertical progression, and a gathering system that gives you materials that still hold their value no matter the expansion. Best in class housing endgame, supportive friendly community, a must experience fantasy storyline, one of the most passionate dev teams in the business, beautiful gear and transmog/glamour that looks wonderful with the ability to dye items, a great guild system, engaging 24-man raids, and finally, a well thought out screenshot utility called the G-Pose tool. Now it might not be for you if these bother you though. It takes a long time for the combat system to open up, some heavy instanced areas, dated graphics and textures, one boss savage raids, clunky transmog glamour system with the glamour chest, a lot of fetch quests early on in the game which are very tedious, the achievement system is very lacking, a lot of items are on the cash shop, and sometimes the way the story is presented with a mix of voice acting and non-voice acted story quests is sometimes immersion breaking at times. Do tell us if you picked up Final Fantasy XIV recently, or even if you're a veteran, tell us your thoughts down in the comments below. If you want to see more from us, please do consider subscribing, as we have many videos on the horizon. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Vance, and I'll see you in the next one.